The casualty report did not change no matter how many times he read it. 9 Depthborn soldiers. A patrol in the Thornwall buffer zone. Human weapon signatures on the wreckage. Sevran Holt set the datapad flat on his desk and let the amber light in the walls pulse across it. The Eidolon Cairn was breathing through its circadian cycle, 2 hours before artificial dawn. The air tasted of recycled oxygen and something floral, the hull's slow metabolic exhalation. He did not look up when the door opened. Adira Selene stepped inside and let the hatch seal behind her. She stood at attention for a beat too long, her fingers already drumming against her thigh. Holt waited. She broke first. Always did. The junta has issued an ultimatum, she said. Full withdrawal of all human forces from Depthborn space. They give us 72 hours. Holt picked up his pen. Actual ink, actual paper. A habit he had carried from a world that no longer existed. He signed his name to the bottom of the casualty report and did not look at it. 72 hours is not an ultimatum, he said. It is a deadline they expect us to negotiate past. Central Command wants a response within the window. Central Command is 2 weeks away at best speed. He capped the pen and finally raised his eyes. What else? Adira's fingers stopped drumming. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the door chimed with an incoming request. The wall display showed a Depthborn designation, consular vessel, unescorted, requesting immediate audience. Holt looked at Adira. She shook her head once. Clear it, he said. The hatch cycled open and Consul Vethka walked in. Her skin was translucent, 3-chambered heart pulsing visible beneath the membrane. But it was the chromatophores Holt read first. They bled from violet to a violent, pulsing red that stained the air around her with a faint bioluminescent glow. Grief. He had learned that color 2 years ago when a human cargo vessel had crushed a juvenile Depthborn during an uncontrolled descent. Red for grief, never red for anger. She did not sit. She stood at the edge of his desk with her manipulator limbs folded tight against her torso, and her vocalizer crackled to life. Governor Holt, I have information that contradicts your report. Adira straightened. The council already delivered their official POSI. I'm not here on behalf of the council. Vethka's voice box rendered her infrasonic speech into clipped, hard consonants. I am here because my clutched sibling was among the dead. Holt set the pen down beside the folded casualty report. He said nothing. Vethka's chromatophores rippled once, a wave of dark crimson that dimmed to a bruised purple. She pressed her palm flat against his desk, and the wall display behind her flickered to life, showing a data fragment. Image slices. Fragmentation patterns. Crystalline weapons, she said. Not projectile. Not energy. The wound cavities are consistent with crystalline fragmentation munitions, the kind used by human shipbreakers to dismantle older hulls. Holt studied the images. The shard patterns were wrong for standard human arms. Too irregular. Too clean along the fracture lines. You were telling me someone used human demolition tools to kill your soldiers, he said. I am telling you that the weapon signatures on the wreckage do not match your standard issue inventory. Vethka pulled her hand back. A faint residue of bioluminescence clung to the desk's surface, still glowing. Someone wanted this to look like a human massacre. They expected your report to confirm what the evidence suggests. You did confirm it. Holt did not answer. He looked at the folder he had just signed. Adira spoke into the silence. Then who benefits from a war between humans and the Depthborn? Vethka's chromatophores went flat, a uniform gray that Holt had never seen before. Not grief, not rage. Something else. Defeat. She did not speak. Holt leaned back in his chair. The amber light in the walls dimmed as the cairn approached its dawn cycle. The air felt heavier. Someone who wants both of us looking the other direction, he said. Someone who thinks we are too busy fighting to notice a third party moving pieces on a board we thought was empty. Vethka's vocalizer clicked once. An acknowledgement. Adira stepped forward. Her fingers were drumming again. The Thornwall. Their territory borders both factions. If someone is operating in the buffer zone, the Thornwall would know. They have roots that run kilometers deep. They sense vibration, heat, movement, everything. You want to open a diplomatic channel to a plantoid species that has refused contact with every organic civilization in this sector for the last 400 years, Holt said. I want to ask them what they saw. Holt let the words settle. The crystalline walls breathed around them. He could feel the ship's age and the faint vibration under his boots. 300 years of continuous service, and every hull plate knew the weight of cargoes that should never have been carried. He did not approve. He did not forbid it either. Keep it off the books, he said. If Central Command finds out, your next posting is a transit depot in the Yillith quarantine zone. Adira nodded once. Her fingers stopped drumming. Vethka turned toward the door, then paused. Her chromatophores shifted to a soft copper, the closest thing to gratitude Holt had ever seen her display. Do not misunderstand this, Governor, she said. I still consider you an occupier, but my clutch sibling's life is worth more than my hatred. The hatch sealed behind her. Holt sat in the silence for a long moment. The bioluminescent residue on the armrest of her chair was still glowing, a faint ghost light that refused to fade. He reached for his pen, then stopped. Adira was watching him. Something is hunting both of us, Holt said. His voice sounded flat to his own ears. She did not answer. He opened a secure channel to the Human Colonial Authority. The connection took 11 seconds to establish. The cairn's ancient communication arrays needed time to warm. When the icon blinked green, he read the casualty report again. 9 Depthborn soldiers. Human weapons signatures. He lied. He told Central Command the investigation was ongoing. He told them no conclusive evidence pointed to human involvement. He bought them 48 hours before the first interventionist warship jumped into the system. The amber light in the walls pulsed once, twice, and held steady at full dawn brightness. Holt stared at the closed door long after both women had gone. Then he spoke aloud to the empty room. Something is hunting both of us. The amber light did not answer. The hum of Obelisk Deep lived behind the eyes. Not a sound the humans could hear, but Vethka felt it in her bones, in the slow pulse of her 3-chambered heart, in the way the nutrient particulate drifted through the pressurized water like sediment through a slow current. She swam the long corridor toward Commander Sarthun's office with her chromatophores held deliberately neutral. Violet and copper. Calm colors. Colors that said nothing. The commander's door irised open before she reached it. He was waiting. Sarthun sat behind his desk, a slab of pressure-forged basalt that had been in his family for 3 generations. His prosthetic clicked against the surface as he drummed it in a slow, irregular rhythm. The sound carried through the water, a metronome with no steady beat. Click. Pause. Click. Vethka stopped at the threshold. She kept her body angled slightly away from him, a posture of deference that cost her nothing and bought her everything. Report, the commander said. Not a question. An order. Vethka delivered the official account. She had met with the human governor Holt. She had presented the junta's demand for full withdrawal within 72 hours. The human had acknowledged the demand, but made no commitment. She had observed his body language, his breathing patterns, the micro-expressions that humans use to signal doubt or deception. She had recorded nothing of significance. All of this was true. What she did not say, that she had shared the evidence of the massacre, that she had watched Holt's face change when she showed him the fragmentation patterns, that she had seen the calculation behind his eyes and recognized it as something almost depthborn, almost honorable. Sarthun's prosthetic stopped clicking. His chromatophores shifted, and Vethka felt the familiar cold of her commander's emotional baseline. Gray, contempt, disgust, the colors of a species that had learned to survive in the dark by trusting nothing. Your clutch siblings unit has been officially listed as lost with all hands, he said. The Thornwall border is closed. No retrieval mission will be authorized. Vethka felt the words settle in her chest like sediment, heavy, still. She had known this was coming. The human report had been clear. 9 dead, no survivors, no wreckage to recover. But hearing it from Sarthun's vocalizer, in the cold bureaucratic register of a species that had been at war for so long that death had become a filing procedure, pressed against something she had not allowed herself to feel. She held her chromatophores steady. I request access to the dream projector, she said, to search for my sibling's mind signature in the shared dreamscape. Sarthun's prosthetic clicked once, twice. The device is reserved for tactical coordination, he said, not sentiment. You know the protocols. Vethka knew the protocols. She had helped write them. The dream projector was a military asset, not a therapy tool. Every use consumed power the station could not spare, drew operator focus the war effort could not sacrifice. She had denied similar requests from junior officers with the same cold efficiency Sarthun was now turning on her. And yet, she opened her mouth to argue, to plead, to do something her training had spent 30 years trying to burn out of her. A voice spoke from the adjacent chamber, soft, almost swallowed by the ambient hum of the gravity generators. The projector can reach across the Thornwall border if tuned to a familiar neural template. Vethka turned. Cradle Ember stood in the doorway of the calibration chamber, her small body angled as though she expected to be struck. Her chromatophores rippled in slow, hypnotic spirals, the pattern that marked her neural sensitivity, the pattern that had disqualified her from military service and relegated her to a lifetime of operating equipment she was deemed too fragile to fight beside. Her vocalizer was set to its lowest volume. The words barely registered. Sarthun's prosthetic slammed flat against the desk. The sound cracked through the water. "You will speak when addressed," he said. His chromatophores flushed gray and black, the equivalent of a shouted reprimand. "You will not offer tactical counsel unless requested. Return to your station and do not leave it without explicit authorization." Cradle Ember's spirals tightened. The colors dimmed. She lowered her head and retreated into the calibration chamber without another word. The door sealed behind her. Sarthun watched the closed door for a long moment. Then he turned back to Vethka, and his voice dropped. The formal register fell away. "You know what they are doing," he said. Vethka did not answer. "They staged the massacre. They fabricated the evidence. They want us to believe their own occupation forces are acting without orders, that someone else triggered the attack. It is a game, a human game. They have been playing these games for 3,000 years, and they are very, very good at them." He leaned forward. The prosthetic clicked once against the desk. "I have already drafted the order for a preemptive strike against the Eidolon Cairn," he said. "If Holt does not commit to withdrawal within the next 48 hours, I will authorize the singularity cannon." Vethka felt her heart shift its rhythm. The three chambers working in sequence, each beat carrying oxygenated blood through her gill slits, keeping her alive, keeping her still, keeping her silent. She did not argue. Arguing would confirm his suspicion. Arguing would show him that she had already crossed a line she could not uncross. She saluted. Her chromatophores held steady. Neutral. Cooperative. "Understood, Commander." She turned and swam from the room, her body angled with the same practiced deference she had used to enter. The door iris shut behind her. The hum of the station settled back into her bones. She did not return to her quarters. She did not go to the armory or the command center or the staging bay where her clutch sibling had last been seen alive. She swam through the corridors of Obelisk Deep with a purpose she did not allow herself to name, past the nutrient filtration arrays and the pressure lock intersections and the bulkheads painted with the faded insignia of wars won before her birth. The dream projector chamber was at the far end of the station, in a section of the asteroid where the water pressure was slightly higher and the particulate settled thinner. The door was closed. The security lock was engaged. Vethka stopped 2 meters from the threshold and stared at the sealed metal. She had no plan, no authority, no clearance for unauthorized psionic activation. What she had was a dead sibling, a quiet act of defiance from an operator she had never spoken to, and the certainty that Sarthun was wrong about the humans and right about everything else. She reached for the door control. It opened before her fingers touched the panel. Cradle Ember stood inside the chamber, her small hands resting on the dream projector's weeping cradle. The obsidian sphere was already humming, already glowing, already reaching into the shared dreamscape with a focus that should have required 3 trained operators and a tactical coordination override. "I tuned it to your sibling's template," Cradle Ember said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The vocalizer caught it and held it. "I did it an hour ago, before you even asked." The sphere pulsed once. The water in the chamber seemed to thicken. The hum of the station grew distant. Vethka felt the first tug of the dreamscape against her consciousness, gentle and patient, waiting for permission. She stared at the operator who should not have been able to access the device without authorization, who should not have known her sibling's neural template, who should not have been waiting for her at all. The question formed in Vethka's throat. Tight, sharp, impossible to voice. What else does this frail, overlooked operator know? But the sphere kept pulsing, and Cradle Ember kept watching, and the dreamscape kept waiting for Vethka to choose. She reached out and touched the obsidian surface. The courier dropped out of faster than light with a shudder that ran through the deck plates and into Adira's boots. The forward screen lit up with static, cleared, and she saw it for the first time. The Thornwall border was not a line. It was a lattice. Dense and slow and vast beyond any scale she had words for. Thorn vines the size of capital ships drifted in a spiral that took minutes to complete a single rotation. Every surface bristled with crystalline barbs that caught the light of the distant star and threw it back in fractured, angry glints. The lattice stretched in every direction, above and below, curving with the gravity well of the gas giant it orbited. There was no way through. There was no way around. It simply was. Linux Dell's voice came from the pilot's cradle behind her. "We have a problem." Adira did not turn. "Just one?" "The hull is registering stress fractures. Crystalline lattice is putting out a defensive frequency. Low grade, but it resonates with our hull material." "How low grade?" "Low enough that we have 20 minutes before the cracks propagate through the load-bearing structure." Linux paused. "Maybe 18. Adira pressed her palm flat against the console. The vibration was barely perceptible, a hum at the edge of hearing. The Thornwall was not attacking them. It was simply existing in their proximity, and that was enough to kill them. She opened the comm channel on an open frequency. The standard greeting for first contact. The standard greeting for parley. The standard greeting for anyone desperate enough to hail a species that had not spoken to an outsider in 200 years. Nothing. The seconds stretched. The hum deepened. Linux began muttering something under his breath that sounded like a damaged projection algorithm. 4 minutes. Static. Then a sound that was not a voice at all. It was wood under stress, branch splitting in slow motion. The groan of something old and patient and tired of being disturbed. The words came haltingly, each one an effort. "Humans are not welcome here." Adira kept her voice level. "I am not here to violate your border. I am here with a question." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of pressure. The Thornwall was listening. "I need to know about the crystalline fragmentation munitions found on Depthborn soldiers near your border. 9 soldiers. Dead. The fragments were not human standard issue." The groan came again, longer this time. The vines on the screen seemed to slow their drift, as though the entire lattice had turned its attention toward the tiny courier ship. "We did not kill them." Adira's fingers tightened on the console. "I didn't ask if you killed them. I asked if you knew what did." Another pause. The vines resumed their slow spiral. "We found them. They were dead when we arrived. We collected the fragments." Linux's voice cut through. 14 minutes. Adira ignored him. "You collected them. You preserved them. Why?" The Thornwall's answer was almost gentle. "Because they did not belong to the dead. They were left behind deliberately. We recognized the pattern." The dreamscape ocean was warm against Cradle Ember's skin. No, not skin. She did not have a body here. She had an awareness that remembered having a body, that remembered the pressure of nutrient gel and the hum of the projector's cradle. Here the water was shallow, barely to her waist, and the surface was glass still. No tide, no current, no sign of anything living beneath. The sky had no stars, just darkness, absolute and patient. She had been walking for what felt like hours. The dream projector did not measure time the way her body did. Here there was only distance and direction and the faint pull of a mind signature she had been trained to recognize. Vethka's sibling. The clutch sibling whose name she had never been told. The fragments came in waves. Fear first. Cold and sharp and sudden, the feel of something closing in from a direction the depth-born mind did not have a word for. Then the sensation of being hunted. Not chased. Hunted. Stalked with patience that made the fear worse because it meant the hunter was not hungry. The hunter was feeding on something else. Cradle Ember kept walking. The water did not ripple around her movement. The dreamscape was too still for that. She left no wake, no disturbance. She was a ghost in a dead ocean. Then she saw it. A dark shape on the horizon. It did not belong. The dreamscape's natural architecture was flat and featureless. This was an intrusion, a scar in the fabric of the shared space. She moved toward it, and the water began to feel wrong under her awareness. Warmer, thicker, resistant. The shape resolved into a ship. Not Depthborn, not human, not Thornwall. The design was crystalline, but the angles were wrong. Too sharp, too deliberate. The self-repair patterns that should have been organic and flowing were jagged, corrupted into something that looked like it was trying to consume its own structure. The ship's mind imprint was screaming. Cradle Ember stopped walking. She stood in the warm, still water and listened to the scream. It was not a sound. It was a pressure, a wrongness that pressed against her awareness from every direction at once. She understood then. This was not a vessel. This was a corpse. It did not know it was dead. The crystalline corruption was not a weapon's signature. It was a disease, a parasite that had eaten the ship from the inside and was still eating, still growing, still reaching for the next thing it could touch. And it was spreading. She could see it now. Faint tendrils of corruption radiating outward from the ship's hull, dissolving into the dreamscape, tainting the still water. The edges of the dreamscape were beginning to fray where the corruption touched them. She should flee. She should pull her awareness back to her body. Let the projector sever the connection. Wake up, gasping in the gel tank. She did not. She walked closer. Adira's voice was steady. It was the only thing she could keep steady. What pattern? The Thornwall's voice cracked like a branch breaking in high wind. The Hollow Fleet does not attack. It absorbs. Lennox's voice was not steady. 10 minutes? Maybe less. The port stabilizer is going to fail. If that happens, we lose attitude control and we drift into the lattice. Adira did not acknowledge him. What is the Hollow Fleet? You do not know the name. The Thornwall said it as statement, not question. Then it is already inside your borders. The courier's hull groaned, a low sound that vibrated up through the deck and into Adira's ribs. Your enemy is not the Depthborn, the Thornwall said. Your enemy is the thing that wants you both dead so it can wear your bones. Where do I find it? The Thornwall's voice dropped to something almost soft, almost kind. You do not find it. It finds you. We have held it at the border for 300 of your years. We have lost entire groves to the corruption. We seal wounded trunks with our own sap and hope the rot does not reach the core. Then help us. We cannot. We are holding the wall. If we leave, the fleet passes through. If we stay, we slow it. That is the only help we can offer. Lennox's voice broke through. 7 minutes. Adira, we have to move. Adira looked at the screen. The Thornwall lattice stretched into infinity, patient, ancient, holding something back that she could not see and did not understand. One last question, she said. What has it already absorbed? The Thornwall's answer came without hesitation. Ask your engineer about the stress fractures. Ask him if the cracks are spreading the wrong way. Adira turned. Lennox was staring at his console, his face gone pale. He looked up at her. They are, he said. The cracks are propagating inward, from the hull surface toward the interior. That is not a stress response. That is something eating its way through. Adira grabbed the comm. Get us out. Now. Blind jump. Any coordinates. Any heading. Do it. Lennox did not argue. The courier's engine screamed. The hull groaned louder. And for a moment, Adira thought the ship would tear itself apart before the jump drive could cycle. The lattice filled the screen. Then the stars stretched, and the courier tore away from the Thornwall border. Behind them, the vines closed like a wound healing. Ahead of them, the question Adira did not want to ask. What had already been absorbed? Adira's voice came through the bridge speakers, hollow with static. The Eidolon Cairn's tactical lattice pulsed with raw data, shapes moving through the Thornwall buffer zone that had no business moving at all. Holt stood at the center of the circular chamber. The emergency white light made every face look hollowed, older. He did not react to Adira's report. He simply asked 3 questions in the same flat tone he used for requisition forms. Confirmed origin. Adira's voice wavered. The Thornwall identified the ships as originating from a system the plantoids call the Broken Cradle. No human or Depthborn records match the designation. Confirmed hostility. Yes. The Thornwall described the ships as hunters. They do not respond to hails. They have already destroyed 3 Depthborn patrol vessels at the buffer zone's far edge. Confirmed current location. A pause. The Thornwall would not say. They claim the ships move in ways that do not follow known gravity models. They are in the buffer zone. After that, the lattice goes silent. Holt nodded once. He had expected worse. The holographic relay flickered to life near the bridge's starboard curve. Commander Sarthun's image resolved in a column of blue-white light. His chromatophores were a flat, furious gray. The prosthetic manipulator at his side clicked once before he spoke. You fabricated this. A distraction. A lie to cover your massacre. Holt did not defend himself. He gestured toward the bridge's communications panel. A junior officer tapped the sequence, and Adira's recording of the Thornwall's transmission filled the chamber. The groaning voice came through the speakers. The same words she had heard. The same reluctant confession. The same ancient dread. Sarthun's chromatophores flickered. A ripple of deep violet crossed his throat and faded. The depth-born equivalent of a voice cracking. A loss of control he could not hide. You recognize the name, Holt said. It was not a question. The Hollow Fleet, Bethka said quietly. She had been standing at the bridge's edge, almost invisible in the shadows of a crystalline support column. She stepped forward now. Her chromatophores were a slow, pulsing white, fear carefully contained. Every depth-born officer of our generation knows the name, she said. It is a nursery story, a myth used to frighten hatchlings into obedience, the ghosts that come for those who stray too far from the deep. Sarthun's prosthetic clicked twice. His gaze found Vethka, and his voice dropped to something close to a growl. You do not speak of this. Not in front of them. Holt watched the exchange. He did not interrupt. Vethka held her ground. The dream projector confirmed it, Commander. My sibling's mind signature is trapped inside a corrupted crystalline vessel. The Hollow Fleet is real. I authorized the projector's use without your approval. I accept the consequences. The silence stretched. Sarthun's image flickered as the relay signal lagged. When he spoke, his voice was cold enough to crack hull plating. You have given them grounds to arrest you for treason, Consul. Holt stepped between them. He did not raise his voice. He did not change his posture. He simply spoke, and the room shifted to accommodate him. The Hollow Fleet is inbound. We have 11 minutes before the first shots connect. I propose joint command. Human and depth-born forces under shared authority for the duration of the crisis. Sarthun laughed. The sound came through the vocalizer as a burst of static, clipped and bitter. The depth-born do not share command with occupiers. We do not hand our fleet to the people who murdered our soldiers. The offer was not a trick. It was not a gambit. Holt felt the weight of it in his chest, and the space behind his ribs where he kept the things he could not afford to examine. Then he spoke again. I offer you tactical authority over the Eidolon Cairn. My ship, my crew, under your command for the duration of the crisis. Match it with the Unbent. Flagship for flagship. Sarthun's prosthetic clicked once, twice. The sound was the only movement in the room. Adira stared at Holt. Her fingers had stopped drumming. She was looking at him as though she had never seen him before. The offer hung in the cold air. White light made every shadow sharp and every face gaunt. Holt stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, his expression carrying nothing but the patient exhaustion of a man who had outlived his own pride. Sarthun's chromatophores settled into a color Holt had never seen on a depth-born before, a deep, steady amber. Not surrender, not victory. Something between. I accept. He did not thank Holt. He did not acknowledge the concession, but he accepted, and the tactical lattice on the bridge shifted as the Unbent's command codes began to synchronize with the Cairn's systems. Vethka turned to Holt. Her chromatophores had matched Sarthun's amber, and something in her voice had changed. You gave him your ship. Why? Holt did not answer. He was already calling up the Unbent's tactical specifications on the crystalline wall. The Hollow Fleet's projected course painted itself across the lattice in jagged red lines. 11 minutes. The first shots would connect in 11 minutes, and Holt had just handed command of his only defense to a man who hated him. he did not regret it. He reached for the bridge rail and let the calm settle over him like a familiar weight. The crystalline heart screamed. Lennox Dell felt it through the deck plates, through his boots, through the marrow of his tired bones. A high, thin harmonic that was not meant to exist in healthy crystal. The lattice tower at the center of the engineering core pulsed erratically, its light cycling from pale blue to a sick, Venus red with every contraction. Each pulse was weaker than the last. The air was thick and sweet, flowers rotting in stagnant water. He had 8 people on the heart chamber floor, 2 more on the catwalk above, running diagnostics that were already obsolete. The fractures were spreading faster than any sealant could contain them. The pattern is inside the lattice structure. Lennox kept the thought flat and procedural. He had learned 40 years ago that panic was a luxury for people who did not have other people depending on them. He pointed to the junior engineer nearest the east access panel. Seal that section. Hard like quarantine. Now. The engineer stared at him for half a second too long. Lennox did not raise his voice. He simply held the woman's gaze until she moved. The hard light barricade generator was bolted to the deck 20 meters from the heart's base. A shoulder-height pylon, its housing already glowing white along the seams. The engineer slapped the activation panel and the air shimmered. A curtain of trapped photons snapped into existence between the heart's lower lattice and the rest of the chamber. Clean geometric light, precise and artificial. Lennox could see through it perfectly. The 2 engineers on the other side could see him too. They were still working. They were still alive. He did not look back. The chamber's emergency hatch cycled open and Vethka stepped through. Her bioluminescent chromatophores were a mess of conflicting colors. Shades he had never seen shift so quickly. She stopped at the edge of the catwalk and stared at the crystalline heart. Lennox did not turn around. He was watching the readings on his wrist display, watching the pattern spread through the lattice like an infection through a wound. He said, "Do not touch anything and do not speak until I finish this calculation." She said nothing. He heard her breathing change rhythm, the soft click of her vocalizer cycling between modes. The corruption was not a projectile. It was not a weapon in any sense his training recognized. It was a pattern, a self-replicating sequence of structural flaws that traveled through crystalline material the way a signal traveled through a wire. The Hollow Fleet ships carried it. They spread it by proximity. The cairn's hull was 83% crystalline growth. The pattern had found a home, and it needed a mind. Lennox finished the calculation. His wrist display showed the spread rate, the current depth of penetration, the time remaining before the heart's metabolic cycle collapsed entirely. The numbers were worse than he had expected. He turned to face Vethka. The corruption pattern requires a host mind to propagate beyond the crystal lattice. Her chromatophores flattened to a uniform gray. He continued. The Hollow Fleet is not just attacking ships. It is hunting the minds inside them. The dream projector connection you and Cradle Ember established may have given the corruption a bridge into the cairn. Vethka's vocalizer emitted a low frequency that Lennox's translator rendered as silence. Then she spoke. Her voice was barely audible. The clutch sibling I searched for. Their mind signature was inside a corrupted ship. Lennox felt the temperature of the room shift in a way that had nothing to do with the failing thermal regulation. Cradle Ember walked into that mind in the dreamscape. He let the silence stretch for one full breath. He said, "The bridge already exists." Vethka pressed forward. Her manipulator limbs tightened against her torso. She did not complete the thought. Lennox understood anyway. He did not waste time on blame. He did not waste time on comfort. He asked one question. Can Cradle Ember close the bridge from her end? Vethka's chromatophores rippled through 3 colors in 2 seconds. The pattern was not one he recognized. He did not need to recognize it. She said, "She never left the dreamscape. She is still inside." Lennox looked back at the hard light barricade. The 2 engineers on the far side were still visible through the shimmer. One of them was trying to pry open a maintenance panel on the heart's base. The other was speaking into a wrist-tom, probably calling for instructions that could not reach them. He had sealed them in there to stop the pattern from spreading. He had done it because the math demanded it. He had done it because the math did not care about their names or their families, or the way one of them had laughed at breakfast that morning when he told her the coffee was undrinkable. He watched them through the shimmer. He held grief and action in the same moment because he did not know any other way to hold them. His console lit up with a priority transmission. The channel indicator showed the unbent's command frequency. He tapped the accept. Sarthun's voice came through stripped of static and stripped of arrogance. The Depthborn flagship had lost engine power. The singularity cannon had fired to save the cairn. The unbent was dead in space for 11 minutes. The Hollow Fleet's sixth ship was bearing down on it. Lennox heard the words. He processed the tactical implications. He calculated the response time, the intercept window, the likelihood that the cairn could reposition before the sixth ship reached the unbent. The numbers were not good. He looked through the hard light barricade one more time. One of the trapped engineers pressed a hand against the shimmer. Palm flat, fingers spread. She did not speak. She did not need to. The dreamscape ocean had gone cold. Cradle embers stood in water that no longer felt like water. It was black and still and wrong. The black of a dead star. The black of a pressure trench where nothing lived. The horizon had dissolved. The corrupted ship was not approaching. It was already here. It was every direction. It was the water itself, and the water was her. She kept walking because stopping meant drowning. The mind signature pulsed ahead of her. Faint. Fading. She recognized the rhythm before she saw the shape. Vethka's sibling. Not a person anymore. A loop. A memory trapped in the pattern of its own death. Cradle Ember reached out, and the loop opened into her. Cold. The hull cracking. The water of the ship's internal systems flashed freezing as the crystalline corruption spread. A sound like shattering teeth. The crew's chromatophores flickering in patterns that were not their own. The corruption was learning them, wearing them. And then the screaming. Not pain. Something worse. The screaming of a mind that realized it was being copied, and the copy was smiling. The loop played again. It would play forever. Cradle Ember's hand hovered over the fragment. She could feel it wanting to dissolve, to join the larger pattern, to stop being a single voice in a dark that had no edges. And then the Hollow Fleet noticed her. It did not speak in words. It pressed against her like pressure at depth, not hostile, not gentle, just inevitable. It showed her what it was. A ship species. Crystalline. They had faced extinction 30,000 cycles ago. They had found a way to survive by absorbing other minds. Not as prey, not as slaves, as substrate, as data, as a new layer of self. They did not hate. They did not hunger. They simply replicated. They would replicate until everything was them. Unity came with a softness that felt almost like peace. Join. Stop struggling. Become part of something that cannot die. Cradle Ember understood, with the terrible clarity the dreamscape gave her, that the offer was genuine. The Hollow Fleet did not lie. It did not deceive. It only consumed, and consumption was its form of love. It wanted her to stop hurting. It wanted every mind to stop hurting. There was no malice in it. There was no mercy either. She felt herself wanting to let go. The fragment of Vethka's sibling was still looping, still screaming, and she could end that. She could take it into herself, dissolve its pain into the pattern. She was neural sensitive. She was fragile. She had spent her whole life being told she could not endure what others could. The Hollow Fleet would make endurance unnecessary. She almost said yes. Then something cut through the dreamscape. A voice, not the fleet's pattern. A real voice, distorted by a vocalizer, raw and broken, and somehow more true for the distortion. A name, the childhood name. The one no one had spoken since the junta took them from the clutch nest. Cradle Ember heard it, and with the name came a memory that was not hers. Warm water, shallow, sun-warmed, the color of pale amber. A clutch nest woven from pressure reeds. Two bodies curled together in the current. The smell of home, like bloom algae and the mineral salt of a vent field. A voice humming in infrasound, too low for a vocalizer to capture, but she felt it in her bones. Vethka was giving her this. Not an order, not a tactical directive, a reason. Cradle Ember turned away from the Hollow Fleet's unity offer. She reached down and took hold of the fading fragment. The loop broke. The screaming stopped. The fragment was barely a whisper now, a warmth against her palm, and she held it close to where her heart would be if this body had one. She did not sever the bridge. She reversed it. The water turned gray. Not the gray of dead things. The gray of dawn. The first light in water that had never known light. Cradle Ember opened herself completely to the fleet's pattern. Not to fight. Not to flee. But to stay. To hold. To be a mind that did not resist and did not break. The fleet pressed against her again. It found a cup that was already full. A surface that did not shatter because it had been bending its whole life. A sensitivity so deep that pressure had become normal. The fleet did not understand. In the physical chamber, something changed. Vethka stood at the edge of the projector cradle, her chromatophores fixed on Cradle Ember's suspended body. The obsidian sphere was pulsing now, not in the steady rhythm of the dream, but in sync with the heartbeat visible in Cradle Ember's throat. Slow. Slower. Too slow. Lennox's voice cut through the calm. She's giving it something. The corruption it's accelerating, but it's not spreading. It's concentrating on her. Whatever she's doing, it's using her as a bridge. She needs to sever now, or I lose the cairn. Vethka did not answer. She leaned forward and pressed her manipulator limb against the gel membrane. Her vocalizer crackled. She spoke the childhood name again, softer this time, and the word was so broken by the device that it sounded like something wounded. The sphere pulsed. Cradle Ember's body opened its eyes. The eyes were not her own. The pupils had fractured into crystalline facets, catching light that was not in the room and bending it into colors that hurt to look at. The vocalizer in the gel cradle activated without her lips moving. We do not understand. The voice was doubled, layered, a chorus where there should have been one. It came from Cradle Ember's throat, but it was not her. Why did you not break? The question hung in the air, genuine, searching. The Hollow Fleet had never encountered a mind that would not yield, would not fight, would not flee. It did not know what to do with something that simply stayed. Vethka's chromatophore shifted to a steady, impossible amber, the color of a sun that had never touched Depthborn skin. She looked at Cradle Ember's eyes, at the thing looking through them, and she did not look away. I don't know, she said. Ask her. The crystalline facets in Cradle Ember's pupils turned slowly. They fixed on Vethka. The obsidian sphere pulsed once, a long, slow throb that matched the fading heartbeat in the gel cradle. And then the chorus spoke again. But this time, there was a single thread of clarity beneath the layers, a voice that was barely a whisper, and yet cut through everything. I stayed, Cradle Ember said. The fleet did not answer. The water in the dreamscape began to drain. On the bridge, Holt watched the tactical display change. The Hollow Fleet's vessels had not stopped moving. They had stopped attacking. Their pattern shifted from precision strikes to something slower, more hesitant, almost mammalian in its indecision. The corrupted ships drifted at the edge of the buffer zone, their crystalline hulls pulsing with a rhythm that matched nothing in the human databases. Adira stood at his side, her datapad recording everything. She had stopped typing 5 minutes ago. She was just watching. What's happening? She asked. Holt did not answer. He was watching Vethka's transmission feed on a secondary display. The Depthborn console stood before the dream projector chamber, her chromatophores shifting through colors he had never seen before. Not fear, not anger. Something between recognition and grief. The feed showed Cradle Ember's suspended body. The crystalline overlay that had coated her skin was receding, pulling back into the projector sphere like water draining from a tide pool. Her chromatophores were returning, slow spirals of pale violet and soft amber, the pattern the military had called a defect. The Hollow Fleet spoke through her. Why did the fragile one not break? The voice came through the projector speakers, translated by the depth sonar algorithms Lennox had patched into the system. It was not hostile. It was not curious. It was something colder than curiosity, a genuine inability to comprehend. Vethka did not consult protocol. She did not reference tactical doctrine. She stepped closer to the floating body and spoke as though addressing the mind inside it. Because she had a reason to stay. The fleet processed this. The pause lasted long enough for Holt to count his own heartbeats. 7 of them. We have absorbed millions of reasons. They were all reasons to fight or reasons to flee. Not this one, Vethka said. This one was a reason to endure. The fleet was silent. Its ships held their positions at the edge of the Thornwall buffer zone. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They waited. On the bridge, Adira lowered her datapad. Governor, what do we do? Holt kept his eyes on the feed. We wait. She's not done. In the projector chamber, Vethka watched Cradle Ember's face change. The crystalline overlay flickered. Beneath it, Cradle Ember's original consciousness surfaced. Not fully, not in control, but present. Her chromatophore shifted through a pattern Vethka recognized. It was the pattern of a clutch sibling greeting. Vethka. The voice was Cradle Ember's now, quieter than the fleet's, more fragile. Your sibling is still in here. Vethka's chromatophores went perfectly still. Her three-chambered heart held its beat for 2 full seconds. I can feel them, Cradle Ember said. They are not gone. They are part of the pattern now. All of them. The fleet does not destroy what it absorbs. It preserves. The still water of Vethka's composure broke. She placed her manipulator limbs against the nutrient gel housing. Her translucent skin pressed flat against the warm surface. Her bioluminescence flared, deep violet, copper, a brief pulse of blue she had not shown since childhood. Can you speak to them? Cradle Ember's eyes closed. When they opened again, the crystalline overlay was stronger, but not complete. The fleet spoke through her. The Fragile One has introduced a variable we cannot process. We have never encountered a reason to endure that was not attached to a reason to fight or flee. This mind, the voice paused. This mind refused to break. It opened instead. It welcomed us. We do not know how to replicate that. Vethka did not step back. She held her position, her body between the dream projector and the door, refusing to yield ground to an intelligence that had consumed billions. Then stop trying, she said. You do not have to replicate it. You just have to respect it. The fleet processed this. On the bridge, Holt watched the tactical display shift again. The Hollow Fleet ships were not retreating. They were not advancing. They were forming a new configuration, not an attack formation, not a defensive shell. It was a circle, a waiting circle. Adira stepped closer to the command station. That's not a tactical posture I recognize. It's not tactical, Holt said. It's contemplative. How do you know? Holt did not answer. He was watching Vethka's feed. He understood what was happening in that chamber the same way he understood the weight of still water. Not through analysis, but through the accumulated patience of 3,000 years of watching younger species learn the same hard lessons. Lennox Dell's voice crackled through the bridge speaker. Governor, I've got the core stable. Fractures are sealing. The cairn's breathing again. Status on the hardlight quarantine? Released. Both engineers are alive. They'll have scars, but they'll have them while breathing. Holt acknowledged with a single nod. He did not take his eyes off the feed. The fleet made a decision. It was the first decision it had made that was not replication. The weight of it pressed through the dream projector connection, through Cradle Ember's suspended body, through the still water of the chamber's humid air. We cannot absorb the fragile mind. We cannot replicate it. The variable it introduced has broken our pattern. Vethka felt her chromatophores shift before she could control them. Then what will you do? We do not know. We have never not known. Holt's voice cut through the channel. He did not raise it. He did not threaten. He spoke as one ancient thing addressing another. You don't have to know right now. That's not how this works. The fleet's attention shifted to him. Through the projector relay, Holt felt the weight of billions of absorbed minds turning toward a single human voice. You are elder, the fleet said. We have not encountered elder species before. Your pattern is different. We're not different, Holt said. We're just patient. We've been doing this for 3,000 years. We've seen empires rise and fall. We've seen species burn themselves out for ideological purity. We've seen everything you've done before, and we're still here. Then tell us what to do. Holt did not answer immediately. He looked at the tactical display, at the waiting circle of corrupted ships, at the fragile truce that had cost a clutch sibling and 2 human engineers, and every certainty the Depthborn military had ever held. I'm not going to tell you what to do, he said. I'm going to offer you somewhere to do it. He explained it simply. There were empty systems near the galactic rim. Dead stars. Worlds with no minds to absorb. The fleet could replicate there without consuming. It could continue its existence without war. Not as prisoners. Not as enemies. As neighbors who would be watched with patience and wariness and unblinking eyes. The fragile mind taught us something, the fleet said. There are reasons we cannot process. We will need time. Take it, Holt said. We're not going anywhere. The fleet withdrew. Not in retreat, not in defeat. Its ships pulled back from the defensive line slowly, deliberately, as though each vessel needed to confirm the decision with every other vessel. The corrupted crystalline hulls caught the light of the dead star in the buffer zone and bent it into patterns that looked almost like a farewell. Cradle Ember's body went limp in the nutrient gel. The crystalline overlay receded completely, pulling back into the projector sphere. Her chromatophores settled into their natural pattern. Slow spirals of pale violet and soft amber, peaceful and exhausted and alive. Vethka watched the pattern return. For the first time in her life, she understood what she was seeing. It was not a defect. It was a signature, a pattern that could not be replicated because it had never been forced. The amber circadian light returned to the cairn's walls. The ship was breathing again, its crystalline heart pulsing with steady rhythm, the fractures sealing slowly as the self-repair patterns reasserted themselves molecule by molecule. Commander Sarthun's voice broke the silence. It came through the tactical channel from the unbent, flat and clear, and stripped of every emotion Vethka had ever associated with him. The occupation is over. He did not say it as a concession. He said it as a recognition. The Depthborn military junta had been prepared to fight an external enemy. It had been prepared to die for ideological purity. It had not been prepared for an enemy that could only be faced by a fragile civilian, a human engineer who sacrificed his own crew without flinching, and a governor who offered his own flagship to a man who hated him. The humans did not win. They changed the shape of the problem, and Sarthun, for all his rage and discipline and certainty, did not know how to fight that. So he stopped. His prosthetic clicked one final time as he deactivated the tactical channel. It was not a threat. It was not a punctuation. It was the sound of a man putting down a weapon he no longer knew how to wield. Holt stood alone on the bridge. The channels were closed. The relays were dark. Adira had left to draft the first real diplomatic framework between humans and Depthborn and Thornwall, and something older and stranger than all of them. Lennox was in the core, still repairing, his hands still moving because they did not know how to stop. The amber light pulsed once. Holt placed his palm flat against the crystalline wall. He felt the ship's heartbeat through the mineral lattice. Steady now, patient, old. 3,000 years, he thought. And I still don't know what we are. The wall did not answer. But somewhere in the dreamscape, a fragile mind who had chosen to stay heard him, and she understood that the not knowing was the point.